most common thing which you might have heard, and you might be very well aware that कि आपने सुना होगा कि premature baby कोई पैदा हुआ, I mean just before time, and then he was kept in NICU, or he needed some oxygen therapy, or he was kept on ventilator. So उस वक्त हमें ये नहीं फिक्र होता कि GI सही काम कर रहा है या नहीं, rest of the systems are working or not, but it's important that as soon as the baby is born, the breathing should be normal. Agar breathing normal nahi hai, then that is, I mean, nobody can do anything, and immediately the baby needs some oxygen support therapy or some, ventilator support. So it's important to know that what are the factors which may lead to abnormality in the development of respiratory system. So to know those factors, first it is important to understand the normal development. Okay, so we'll be going through the normal development of respiratory system. I hope you are aware that the respiratory system as a whole is divided into two parts. One is the upper respiratory system, which is up to the larynx, okay, lower part of the larynx, and the lower respiratory tract starts from the trachea towards the bronchi, and then the alveoli, and ultimately where the blood and gas exchange is taking place. So the upper part of the respiratory system is mainly present in head and neck region. What do we mean by upper part of respiratory system? It consists of nasal cavities, okay, the external nose, the nasal cavity. Then we have the nasopharynx, that is part of the pharynx. Pharynx has three parts. It's a wider tube which is connected to three areas. Now, what are those? This is nasopharynx, this is oropharynx, and this is laryngopharynx. Means the part which is related to the larynx. These three parts are parts of pharynx. Then the pharynx, you can see that it is dividing into two parts. One is the posterior part, that is esophagus, okay. Another is anterior part, which is known as the larynx, right? So you are aware about this. So larynx ends and trachea starts, okay. Here up to this point, this is the upper respiratory tract, right? From here, the lower respiratory tract is starting. We will be focusing in your respiratory module, we'll be focusing on lower respiratory tract, development of lower respiratory tract. Okay, the upper respiratory tract will be dealt with head and neck module more in detail. Although you had some introduction, but development wise, आपसे nasal cavity की development नहीं पूछी जाएगी in respiratory module. Similarly, आपसे pharynx की development नहीं पूछी जाएगी, right? And even larynx, that is also related to the head and neck region. So ये चीजें आपसे okay. Someone is asking me to repeat the parts of larynx. I did not, Aksa, I told about the parts of pharynx. Okay, pharynx के तीन parts हैं, right? Larynx के parts मैंने नहीं बताई. Larynx is specifically made up of cartilages, paired and unpaired cartilages. ठीक है? Larynx के दो ही communications होंगे, एक तो pharynx के साथ और दूसरा नीचे trachea के साथ continuity. The parts are of pharynx, क्योंकि आपको पता है pharynx की posterior wall होती है. Anteriorly pharynx is open. कहाँ पे open है? एक तो nasopharynx ऊपर, ठीक है, फिर oropharynx mouth. यूं समझ लें ये nasal cavity, mouth और ये larynx, इन तीनों के पीछे pharynx है, ठीक है. So anteriorly pharynx is opening into the nasopharynx, ठीक है, और nasopharynx is nasal cavity is opening into the nasopharynx. जो part है nasal cavity का towards pharynx, that is known as nasopharynx. जो पार्ट माउथ का ओपन हो रहा है pharynx में, that is oropharynx, और जो larynx का पार्ट ओपन होगा, that is laryngopharynx. These are the three parts of pharynx, ठीक है. ये pharynx है, this area, this upper part is nasopharynx, this is oropharynx, and this is laryngopharynx. Clear, Aksa? Right? These are the three parts of the pharynx. What I meant to tell you is that development of upper respiratory tract or the areas which are related to the upper respiratory tract will cover in head and neck module. क्योंकि ये develop ही होते हैं head and neck के साथ. The structures of the head and neck along with the other structures of head and neck, this part develops. So we'll be concentrating on development of trachea as well as the development of the lungs. Okay. Another thing which I'm just giving you an introduction. I just wanted to show you a video so that you understand the process of development. Now remember that whenever we talk, if anyone asks you from which germ layer the respiratory system is developing. I mean to say lower respiratory system. Okay? Trachea and the lungs, from which embryonic germ layer? Ectoderm, mesoderm, endoderm. Mesoderm, okay. Yes. Okay, mesoderm, right. Okay, okay. It's actually endoderm. Remember, if you recall the respiratory system, it develops from the endoderm. Why we say endoderm? But remember that none of the systems, say even if it is endocrine system, if it is GI or gastrointestinal system, if it is heart, these systems do not develop just from single layer. लेकिन जो फंक्शनल कंपोनेंट जिस लेयर से होगा हम उसका पेरेंट जर्म लेयर वही कहेंगे, फंक्शनल कंपोनेंट. So functional component of the respiratory tract is developing from endoderm. How is it developing from endoderm? ये actually foregut से drive होता है. How it is developing from foregut, I'll show you. Okay. So you समझ लें कि this functional part, अब functional part कौन सा होता है किसी भी सिस्टम का? वन इज फंक्शनल पार्ट जिसको हम कहते हैं पेरेन्काइमा, और दूसरा होता है सपोर्टिव स्ट्रक्चर जिसको हम कहते हैं स्ट्रोमा. स्ट्रोमा का मतलब है किसी भी ग्लैंड के लिए. अदरवाइज फंक्शनल पार्ट में आपको पता होगा, बल्कि आपने पढ़ा भी होगा कि देयर इज एपिथेलियल लाइनिंग. ठीक है, फिर आपने सब म्यूकोजा पढ़ा होगा, फिर आपने ये पढ़ा होगा कि कार्टिलेज है या मसल्स हैं ऑल अराउंड, और आखिर में एडवेंटिशिया. हैव यू रेड दीज लेयर्स? ठीक है, ट्रेकिया में भी आपने कार्टिलेजिनस रिंग पढ़ी है, मसल पढ़ी है, इनसाइड देयर इज एपिथेलियम, राइट. ये आपने लेयर्स पढ़े हैं. ठीक है, और आउटर लेयर है एक फाइब्रस टिश्यू का. सिमिलरली लंग्स में भी यही एपिथेलियल लाइनिंग है, देन देयर इज मसल्स. ओके, मसल्स के बाद जो है कनेक्टिव टिश्यू आ जाएगा एज अ लेयर. Leaving aside the alveoli which are only lined by the flattened epithelium. ठीक है, so remember that the functional layer means epithelium, glands, they are derived from endoderm. बाकी जो मसल्स हैं या कनेक्टिव टिश्यू है that is derived from mesoderm. लेकिन अगर आपसे कोई पूछेगा which germ layer gives rise to respiratory system, your answer should be endoderm. ठीक है, क्योंकि functional component endoderm से आ रहा है. Baki supporting structures, yes, that would be from the mesoderm. Okay. Another question, that if I ask you, and as I said, a mesoderm also takes part. Which part of the mesoderm takes part? Number one, tell me, either it is extraembryonic mesoderm or intraembryonic mesoderm. Which mesoderm will take part in the formation of the muscles and connective tissue component? Intraembryonic. Mustafa, very good. Okay. Yes, Anzila, Ikra, you all are right, right? एक तो ये कॉन्सेप्ट आपका क्लियर हो, एंड ऑब्वियसली दिस इज ये एक कॉमन सेंस का क्वेश्चन है, क्योंकि एम्ब्रियो की जो भी स्ट्रक्चर्स, बॉडी स्ट्रक्चर्स बन रही हैं वो इंट्रा एम्ब्रियोनिक मेसोडर्म से, नॉट एक्स्ट्रा एम्ब्रियोनिक. अच्छा, टेल मी देन व्हाट एक्स्ट्रा एम्ब्रियोनिक इज फॉर्मिंग? एक्स्ट्रा एम्ब्रियोनिक क्या चीज बना रही है? यस मुस्तफा, यस, it forms the amniotic cavity. Okay, amnion is actually forming the amniotic cavity. Extra embryonic mesoderm जो है that is involved in formation of vessels and means which will take part in the formation of umbilical cord, placenta. जो बहरहाल एम्ब्रियो के बाहर जो चीजें आ जाएंगी. ठीक है, umbilical cord एम्ब्रियो के बाहर है, बॉडी से बाहर है ना. Similarly placenta बाहर है. So all these layers, yes, chorion will be formed. Chorion is part of the it will be one lining of the extra embryonic mesoderm. लेकिन जो blood vessels और veins हैं, placenta है, these extra embryonic mesoderm will take part in the formation of those structures. जो भी हमारे अंदर structures हैं mesoderm से related, they are all from the intraembryonic mesoderm. ठीक. अच्छा, another question, if it is intraembryonic mesoderm, which part of the mesoderm will give rise to the muscles and the connective tissue component of respiratory tract? Either it is splanchnic mesoderm or it is somatic mesoderm. Splanchnic lateral plate mesoderm or somatic lateral plate mesoderm. I hope you remember the lateral plate divides into two. Okay, एक जो लाइन कर रहा है amniotic cavity को, that is somatic, और एक जो लाइन कर रहा था yolk sac को and endoderm को, that was the splanchnic mesoderm. So which mesoderm is going to take part in this formation? Okay, Zishan says splanchnic, someone else says Mustafa, and Zahra, they say okay. Remember, it is splanchnic mesoderm, right? क्योंकि मैंने अभी आपको, अच्छा मैंने आपको क्या बताया कि फंक्शनल कंपोनेंट कहाँ से हो रहा है? टेल मी, फंक्शनल कंपोनेंट ऑफ रेस्पिरेटरी ट्रैक्ट किस जर्म लेयर से? एंडोडर्म से, राइट? एंडोडर्म, गुड रमशद, ठीक है। एंडोडर्म से फंक्शनल लेयर आ रहा है। अब इस लेयर को बताएं, एंडोडर्म कहाँ पे होता है? एंडोडर्म नीचे होता है, ठीक है। एंडोडर्म इज कंटिन्यूअस विथ व्हिच कैविटी? एंडोडर्म इज कंटिन्यूअस विथ व्हिच कैविटी? GIT, okay. And endoderm will be forming amniotic cavity. Yes, it is yolk sac, right? Amniotic cavity is related to the ectoderm before folding. Imagine before folding, when the embryo is a flat disc, this is ectoderm, in between mesoderm, and this is endoderm. Okay, endoderm is continuous with the yolk sac, right? अच्छा, अब आप मुझे बताएं, lateral plate mesoderm यहाँ पे होगा ना, lateral side पे, before folding I am talking, ठीक है? Before folding this would be the lateral plate mesoderm, isn't it? बिल्कुल corner पे, although in between ectoderm and endoderm, right? Is it clear? Okay. अच्छा, यहाँ पे amniotic cavity है ectoderm की side पे, and ये yolk sac है, right? अच्छा, ये lateral plate mesoderm दो में divide हो रहा है, ठीक? दो में divide हो रहा है, एक ऊपर चला गया around the amniotic cavity और एक नीचे आ गया around the endoderm and yolk sac. See, endoderm is continuous with the yolk sac, right? Are you getting this concept? I'll show you lots of diagrams. Diagrams bhi dikha dungi, but just I want that you build up this concept in your mind. ठीक है? ये endoderm is continuous with the yolk sac. Now, the part of the mesoderm which is covering the amnion is which one? Is splanchnic or somatic? Somatic, right? Okay, great. And the part of the mesoderm which covers the endoderm and yolk sac would be splanchnic, right? Clear till this point? अच्छा, अब हमने कहा कि respiratory system is developing from what? Endoderm or ectoderm? Endoderm. So by rule, which mesoderm should cover it? Which mesoderm should take part in the formation of muscles and splanchnic? Great. Okay, got the concept? Why splanchnic mesoderm is taking part in the formation of the muscles and the connective tissue of the lungs. ठीक है? हाँ, remember that body wall की जो muscles हैं, जैसे intercostal muscles हैं या ऊपर pect major, minor, serratus anterior, etc. ये सारी muscles somatic से आएंगी, somites से आएंगी, ठीक है? The somite part of the mesoderm, right? So this is how we'll be starting. Now what I want to make you understand is कि एक तो concept समझ लें कि एंडोडर्म से ड्राइव हो रहा है रेस्पिरेटरी सिस्टम, ठीक है। दूसरा मैंने आपको ये बताया कि वी विल बी डिस्कसिंग लोअर रेस्पिरेटरी ट्रैक्ट, क्योंकि अपर रेस्पिरेटरी ट्रैक्ट जो है दैट इज डेवलप्ड फ्रॉम द developed along with the head and neck region. So अच्छा, this is what I was just asking you question कि from endoderm as a whole, when anyone asks you कि from where the respiratory system is developing, your answer would be endoderm, ठीक है। Then specifically someone may ask you, okay, all layers of the respiratory system are developing from the endoderm. Your answer would be somatic membrane, somatic mesoderm. Zishan, you have asked me that somatic mesoderm will make membrane. Which membrane you are talking about? The chorion and the amniotic membrane, you mean to say? Do you want आप fetal membranes की बात कर रहे हैं, or you are talking about the membranes which are formed with the systems or coverings of the systems like that? If you're talking about fetal membranes are chorion, amniotic membrane. Okay, the systems are the membrane of the system is actually, for example, जो भी organ है, जैसे GIT है, उसकी जो outer covering है, that is known as adventitia, ठीक है, या serous membrane भी कहते हैं. These membranes, these are formed by, when we'll discuss, we'll be discussing the pleural cavity. Okay, so pleural cavity is actually formed in the mesoderm, right? So we'll be discussing along with the pleural cavity. So the endoderm gives rise to epithelial lining of the trachea, larynx, bronchi, alveoli, right? So epithelial lining क्या है? Functional component, क्योंकि epithelium में ही glands होते हैं और epithelium ही gas exchange से related है. So that's why we say that functional component is derived from the endoderm. अच्छा, all layers? No, all layers are not, because cartilage, muscle, connective tissue, the visceral pleura, okay, these are derived from the splanchnic mesoderm. The parietal pleura is related to the somatic mesoderm, right, Zishan? But the visceral pleura is derived from the splanchnic mesoderm. Okay, so we'll be discussing this point when we are discussing the visceral and the parietal pleura. So here you can see this is the tube which is going to develop into the respiratory system, and this is surrounded by the mesoderm, which is splanchnic mesoderm, right? So you can see that how this simple mesenchymal structure is going to change into different layers. और ये अंदर endoderm है, which is forming the connective tissue and other structure, and this is the ultimately the mesenchyme is going to change into muscles, it is going to change into the cartilage, and ultimately the outer layer, adventitious layer as well. So बाकी जो layers हैं outside, हालांकि आप देखेंगे bigger contribution जैसे splanchnic mesoderm की है, but we do not give much contribution क्योंकि जब तक functional component नहीं होगा organ का function perform नहीं होगा. So main functional component is by the endoderm. That's why everywhere you will see that endoderm is as if yellowish in color, और mesoderm को आप red in color देखेंगे क्योंकि muscles generally red in color, blood vessels red in color, so that's why you will see pinkish or reddish color. Okay, so as I told you, the upper respiratory tract, this is the developing embryo, and the head and neck region of the embryo develops from a particular structure जिसको हम कहते हैं pharyngeal arches. आपको ये नजर आ रही है, ये एक फर्स्ट आर्च है, ये सेकंड आर्च है, ये थर्ड है, ये फोर्थ है. ये डेवलपमेंट हम पूरी की पूरी, ये नेजल प्लेकोड है, ठीक है, यहाँ पे नोज बनेगा, नेजल प्लेकोड. देखें हमारा नोज एक साथ है ना, ये एक नॉस्ट्रल, ये दूसरा नॉस्ट्रल. नॉर्मली ड्यूरिंग डेवलपमेंट एक नॉस्ट्रल यहाँ होता है, एक नॉस्ट्रल यहाँ होता है, फिर फोल्डिंग ऑफ एम्ब्रियो की वजह से ये दोनों नॉस्ट्रल्स आगे जाके मिल जाते हैं, एंड वी हैव सिंगल नोज इन द मिडिल, राइट. और आईज जो है वो यहाँ पे होती है, ठीक है, फिर जब फोल्डिंग होती है तो फिर आईज जो है यहाँ पे आ जाती है, इसी तरह. सो द डेवलपमेंट ऑफ हेड एंड नेक इज वेरी इंटरेस्टिंग, विल डिस्कस इन फ्यूचर. So the nasal cavity and the larynx, these parts they develop along with the head and neck region. We'll be discussing. आपसे अगर कोई पूछे, it is enough to tell that this structure, you can see that this is the nostril. Okay, these are the two nostrils which will ultimately join to form the single nose in the middle. This is how we are actually developed. Okay. So along with this nasal cavities बन जाएगी pharyngeal arches से, इसी तरह अंदर larynx भी बन जाएगी pharyngeal arches से, pharynx बन जाएगी. This is what we call as the upper respiratory tract. Okay. So now how the lower respiratory tract developed. Okay. So the first concept which you must remember is the folding of the embryo. ठीक है, यही हम चीज डिस्कस कर चुके हैं while discussing the body cavities. Now folding of embryo में, now forget about the other structures, just concentrate on this endoderm and the yolk sac. Now see the part of the endoderm, because of folding of the embryo, ये पूरी yellow line आपको नजर आ रही है, this whole yellow line has now gone inside the embryo. पहले यहाँ पे देखें जब flat disc है तो it is exposed to the yolk sac, ठीक है. अब embryo को fold होना है, ठीक, folding की वजह से ये जो endoderm था वो बिल्कुल अंदर चला गया, बॉडी में अंदर चला गया. क्यों अंदर चला गया? क्योंकि okay, you want to see this video again? This is an animated picture. This is development of the head and neck region. बेटा I am not going in detail because I just want to show you कि कैसे nose develop हो रहा है. pharyngeal arch, pharyngeal arches पहले इस तरह होती हैं, ठीक है, आप देख सकते हैं कि ये आपस में फिर मर्ज हो जाती है, हालांकि कोई डिवाइडिंग लाइन नहीं है, बट रिमेंबर दैट ये आर्च अलग है, ये आर्च अलग है, ये सारी आपस में बिल्कुल इस तरह ज्वाइन कर जाती हैं कि आपको फिर नजर नहीं आता, कोई ज्वाइंट नजर नहीं आता, यूनियन पॉइंट कोई नजर नहीं आता. यू कैन सी दिस इज सो स्मूथ, राइट. अगर ये प्रॉपरली ज्वाइन नहीं हो, आपने कभी क्लेफ्ट लिप या क्लेफ्ट पैलेट का पेशेंट देखा है? क्लेफ्ट लिप होता है. ओके, हैव यू एवर हर्ड ऑफ इट? अगर ये प्रॉपरली ये आर्चेस ज्वाइन ना करें तो क्लेफ्ट पैलेट हो सकती है, क्लेफ्ट लिप हो सकता है, राइट, ये बेबीज में. सो हेड एंड नेक डेवलपमेंट इज रिलेटेड टू द pharyngeal arches. ठीक है, pharyngeal arches किसे कहते हैं? ये है pharyngeal arches. ये फर्स्ट, ये सेकंड, ये थर्ड, फोर्थ, 6 pharyngeal arches होती हैं जिनसे पूरा हेड एंड नेक का स्ट्रक्चर बनता है. वी विल डिस्कस लेटर ऑन. ठीक, नाउ अलोंग विद दिस pharyngeal arches, क्योंकि नोज इज पार्ट ऑफ द फेस, ठीक है, nose is part of the face, nose develops along with the face, and but nose is part of, not functionally nose is not part of face, it is actually part of the respiratory system. यहाँ से हम air ले रहे हैं ना, so this is part of the respiratory system, but we are not discussing the development of respiratory system because this will be discussed and asked along with the head and neck module. ठीक, Just remember that larynx, pharynx, nasal cavity, they all develop from the pharyngeal arches. ठीक है, अगर ये याद नहीं रहा pharyngeal arches, just remember that they develop along with the head and neck, right? अच्छा, coming to the development of lower respiratory tract, इसके लिए मैं आपको कह रही हूँ कि ये समझना जरूरी है कि किस तरह एंडोडर्म बॉडी में अंदर चला जाता है. Initially it is yes, definitely. Okay, Zishan has said yes. Zishan, they are in the surgery. Yes, cleft palate definitely surgery से corrective surgery correction होती है. Plastic surgical operations होते हैं. बहुत staged procedure है. बहुत ज़्यादा gap होता है तो आहिस्ता आहिस्ता first surgery, second surgery, but ultimately your question is what happens in the surgery. What we do is we mobilize. देखें बहुत gap है, हम mobilize करते हैं skin को, फिर मसल्स को, फिर उनको खींच के स्टिच लगा देते हैं. ठीक है, दिस इज अ प्रोसीजर. मैं सिर्फ आपको समझाने के लिए बता रही हूँ कि खींच के इसका आप ये ना समझे कि खींचेंगे तो चीजें टूट जाएंगी, इस तरह नहीं है. सो वी टेक लेयर बाय लेयर, म्यूकोजा को रिपेयर कर देते हैं, मसल्स को रिपेयर कर देते हैं, स्किन को ऊपर रिपेयर कर देते हैं, और इतने सॉफ्ट जो है स्टिच मटेरियल यूज होते हैं कि वो फिर स्कार भी बहुत कम नजर आता है. ठीक है, ऐसे आजकल सर्जिकल मटेरियल यूज हो रहा है कि बहुत कम स्कार नजर आता है because of this surgery. ठीक है, so yes, corrective surgeries can be done in cleft palate, cleft lip. We will be discussing this topic as well in the head and neck module. So the endoderm is taken up inside. ठीक है, this is the endoderm which is taken up inside the body. अब endoderm, ये endoderm जो है पूरा क्या बना रहा है? Actually this is forming GI tube. इस पूरे एरिया को, where I have just keep this pointer, this is known as the GI tube. ठीक है, ये जो proximal है head and neck, ये I hope you remember, this is the head end and this is the tail end of the embryo. या this is cranial and this is caudal. ये तो समझ आ रहा है ना? This is cranial. ठीक है, ये neural tube है पूरा का पूरा, blue जो develop हो रहा है, this is neural tube. और ये पूरी amniotic cavity है जो ultimately surround कर लेगी baby को during folding. ठीक है, अच्छा. Another thing which I want to tell you is कि this hole is the endoderm tube. अब ये थोड़ा सा concept देखें, कभी-कभी concept जहन में अगर नहीं आता तो थोड़ी सी एटलीस्ट डायग्राम में स्ट्रक्चर याद कर लें. ठीक, क्या स्ट्रक्चर याद करनी है कि this part of the endoderm which is taken up inside. taken up inside का मतलब जो अंदर चला गया बॉडी में, पहले बाहर था ना, यूं थी एम्ब्रियोनिक डिस्क. ठीक है, एम्ब्रियोनिक डिस्क वाज फ्लैट, राइट, ये एंडोडर्म था. ठीक है, अब जब फोल्डिंग हुई एम्ब्रियो की लाइक दिस, तो एंडोडर्म कहाँ चला गया? ऑब्वियसली अंदर चला गया. ठीक है, so this is happening in this picture. So the proximal part of this tube or endoderm is known as foregut. जो connected है umbilical vesicle से, this is midgut, और जो caudal part में है, this is hindgut. ठीक है, ये है GI की डेवलपमेंट, राइट. अब मैं ये क्यों बता रही हूँ? क्योंकि the lungs start developing from foregut. ठीक है, endoderm of the foregut. देखें, it is a miracle. क्यों miracle है? कहाँ respiratory system का function, कहाँ GI का function. But God has given us respiratory system from the foregut, from the esophagus, right? So this is how the trachea will start developing. So what is happening? अब आप समझ आ गया ये क्या है? foregut region. ठीक है, this upper part is known as foregut. ठीक है, foregut समझ आ गई? What is foregut? It is the proximal portion of the gut tube. ठीक है, what is gut tube? It is the endoderm which was taken up inside. Concept आ गया foregut का? Shall we move forward? Any confusion in this? Okay, clear? Right. Foregut याद रखें. ठीक है, midgut, hindgut को भूल जाएं, हम GI में पढ़ेंगे. Right? Foregut is the proximal portion, जो यहाँ से यहाँ तक एपिगेस्ट्रिक रीजन, जहाँ पे स्टमक होता है, यहाँ से यहाँ तक का जो पोर्शन है जिससे GI डेवलप होगा, that is known as, okay, I'll be just showing you a video where you will understand. ठीक है, ये पोर्शन जो है ये foregut है, नजर आ रहा है, ये स्टमक डेवलप होगा, ये पूरा इसोफेगस डेवलप हो रहा है. ठीक है, ये जो पोर्शन है, दिस इज माउथ रीजन, ये फेरिंक्स में डेवलप होगा, ये लैरिंक्स में डेवलप हो जाएगा. दिस विल बी डेवलप्ड एज लंग एंड द ट्रेकिया. ठीक, forget about the structures which are related to GI, right? अच्छा, now what is happening during 4th week? देखें, every system will start developing from 4th week onwards except nervous system and the CVS, which started developing during third week. Okay? So rest of the system they mostly start developing during fourth week. So what is happening? Folding हो गई embryo की, endoderm अंदर चला गया, ठीक? अब क्या हो रहा है फोर्थ वीक में कि अब bud appears, ठीक है? अब bud appears from the foregut anteriorly, ठीक है? ये foregut है, यहाँ से एक bud appear होती है. This is known as respiratory diverticulum. किस तरह bud appear होगी? I'll show you video. ठीक है? ये bud appear होगी, you and this bud will divide into two. टू में क्यों डिवाइड हो रही है? क्योंकि दो लंग्स हैं, ठीक है? सो एक रेस्पिरेटरी बड विल अपीयर ड्यूरिंग फोर्थ वीक. जो क्वेश्चन कॉमनली पूछा जाता है आपसे, एक तो फ्रॉम व्हिच लेयर इट इज ड्राइव्ड, ठीक है? आपने बताना है कि एंडोडर्म गिव्स राइज टू द फंक्शनल कंपोनेंट ऑफ द रेस्पिरेटरी ट्रैक्ट. Rest of the structures they develop from the splanchnic mesoderm. How the development starts? It starts during fourth week when respiratory diverticulum arises from the foregut, front of the or anterior portion of the foregut, right? अच्छा, अब आप मुझे बताएं, this is happening in the foregut part, ठीक है? The location of the foregut is controlled by certain genes, ठीक है? ये नहीं है कि ये जो बड है ये पूरी की पूरी फोरगट है यहाँ तक, ठीक है? ये नजर आ रहा है यहाँ तक, सेप्टम ट्रांसवर्सल तक ये फोरगट है. तो ये जो लंग बड है वो यहाँ से अपीयर होती, यहाँ से अपीयर होती, यहाँ से होती, यहाँ से क्यों हो रही? Because the genes are released here. The growth factors, especially the fibroblast growth factors, arises in only in this region so that lungs should start. ठीक है? वरना यूं यहाँ से निकल आए lungs, कहीं से भी निकल आए, मर्जी? No मर्जी. It's under control. ठीक है? Fibroblast growth factor would be released in particularly that region कि वहां से lung bud appear. ये समझ आ रहा है? Otherwise this whole is foregut. It is same, but it is in a particular region जहां से larynx खत्म होगी, trachea start होना चाहिए, वहां से ये lung bud appear होगी. ठीक है? So the first step is the formation of the lung bud. Now I'll be just showing you a video where you will understand how lung then develops into the lung bud develops into it will be a bit faster, so kindly try to keep a pace as soon as I'm going to describe this. Okay, so this is the embryo. ठीक है? अब ये आप समझ लें, embryo की different structures आपको नजर आएंगे. ये head end है, ठीक है? Let me pass this. ठीक है? ये स्ट्रक्चर समझ आ रही है? सी इमीडिएटली आपको चीजें समझ आनी चाहिए. पहली जो चीज आप जब भी कोई स्ट्रक्चर आइडेंटिफाई करने की कोशिश करें, पहले तो डिसाइड कर लें कि हेड एंड रीजन क्या कौन सा है, टेल एंड कौन सा है. ठीक है? दिस इज क्रेनियल, दिस इज कॉर्डल, राइट? नंबर 1. नंबर 2, जो येलो स्ट्रक्चर आपको नजर आया, रिमेंबर दैट इट इज एंडोडर्म, राइट? ठीक? सो आप देख लें कि दिस होल इज एंडोडर्म, राइट? ठीक? ये जो एंडोडर्म है, दिस इज एंडोडर्म ऑफ द, ये क्यों नजर आ रहा है इस तरह? ये मैंने आपको क्या बताया, क्या है? 1 2 3 4 5 6. What are these structures? Hurry up. This is head and neck region. And what are these 6 structures? What did I say? Arches. Very good. Okay. Pharyngeal भूल भी जाए, arches के लिए. Excellent, Zara and everyone. Right. Okay. So these are pharyngeal arches. यहाँ पे nasal cavity भी develop होगी, larynx भी develop होगी. Now we are concerned at this region. ठीक है? This part is known as foregut. Okay. Endoderm of the foregut. This part is known as midgut. और मिडगट के बाद ये कंटिन्यूटी में ये पूरी हाइंड गट है. ठीक है? हम जीआई डेवलपमेंट पढ़ेंगे, इस डायग्राम को याद रखिएगा, हम यहीं से स्टार्ट करेंगे. ओके, नाउ व्हाट इज हैपनिंग ड्यूरिंग फोर्थ वीक? आप ये देखेंगे, दिस इज द लंग बड. ठीक है? ओहो Rishana, very big question. What causes the cells of this region to activate its genes? Is there any influence of other tissues? Yes, it's not just a single structure which activates it. There are many factors which actually are involved. One of the main, मैंने आपको एक main factor बता दिया, fibroblast growth factor, which is released in abundance in this area. Plus the splanchnic mesenchyme, ठीक है? Splanchnic mesenchyme which is present around this endoderm will also receive some signals. Now, what are the sources of signals? This is a bit beyond your, level. So that's why I'm not going in detail. You can ask these questions and I'll answer you on the LMS. Okay? So let me first give you a broad concept of how the lungs are developing. So this is the lung bud, right? and yes, it is receiving many signals in terms of genes and growth factors, and these signals are not only to endoderm but splanchnic mesoderm as well to develop into the respiratory system. Okay, now see, I'll just forward it because this is how it is developing into the larynx and the pharynx. This is you will not understand this, that's why I'm not going in detail. Pharynx समझ लें, pharynx and larynx both have developed. I'll be concentrating on developing of the trachea bronchi. Okay, till 10th week the larynx is also formed. Now coming back to the respiratory diverticulum. ठीक है, now respiratory diverticulum किस week में start हो रहा है? During the 4th week. Now you will see that this is the respiratory diverticulum. It is on the anterior surface of the endoderm of the foregut. ठीक है, now what is happening that अच्छा, now see, this is the respiratory diverticulum. You are looking at a lateral diagram. ठीक है, ये anteriorly हो रहा है and it is surrounded by, you can see it is surrounded by the mesenchyme which is known as splanchnic mesoderm. ठीक है, all around it is surrounded by splanchnic mesoderm. Now you will notice that two events happen only. ठीक है, just tell me कि foregut का ये portion क्या बना रहा है posteriorly? What is developing from the foregut? Just behind trachea कौन? Esophagus. Excellent Ariba, right? This is the esophagus developing. लेकिन देखें esophagus जो है वो trachea से contact में तो नहीं है ना, but trachea is developing from the esophagus. ठीक है, so it is necessary that as soon as trachea is developing, it should lose its contact from the esophagus. Esophagus should get separated, वरना every time we are eating food, it will enter into the trachea. तो ये तो नहीं होता ना, लेकिन हमारे पास larynx है and the larynx is closed by which structure while we are eating or drinking water? See, pharynx is coming, yes, epiglottis, right? Epiglottis closes the larynx while we are drinking water or we are taking some meals. इसीलिए कहा जाता है कि जब आप कुछ खाएं तो मेहरबानी करके don't talk. अच्छा, अगर हम खाने के दौरान बात कर रहे हैं तो क्या होगा? बात करने के लिए आपको पता है it is necessary that vocal cords should be open. Now how vocal cords will open? When epiglottis is, yes, epiglottis is open. So when you talk while eating or drinking water, while eating if you are talking, the epiglottis will open क्योंकि vocal cords काम कर रहे हैं and the food will enter into the larynx. और severe आपको cough bouts होते हैं. लेकिन this is larynx, this is not trachea. But esophagus, the trachea is developing from the esophagus. It is necessary, ये concept समझना जरूरी है to understand tracheoesophageal fistula as a congenital abnormality. The trachea is developing from esophagus, but then the tracheoesophageal septum develops, which separates these two structures. So this is what you will learn in this. Okay, so this is the splanchnic mesoderm. You will see that how this splanchnic mesoderm is developing into the pleural cavities and developing into the parietal and visceral pleura. So this is lung bud developing. Okay, once the tracheal bud कहते हैं or lung bud. The tracheal bud is single and then it will immediately divides into two lung buds. ठीक है, Hamna, what is NU? Okay, these are the two lung buds, right? Do you want to ask anything, Hamna? You may write your questions. Yes, I'm just showing you. Okay, I'm showing you how the trachea and the trachea and the esophagus shall separate. ठीक है. Now here one concept is very necessary. This is the splanchnic mesoderm. ठीक है, the splanchnic the lung buds are growing into the splanchnic mesoderm, which is going to form, ये endoderm है और ये mesoderm है. This layer is going to form, the splanchnic mesoderm will form the muscles as well as the connective tissue of the lungs. Plus this layer will also develop into the pleural cavities. ठीक है, pleura, not pleural cavity, because pleural cavity is actually the intraembryonic coelom. So these are the two lung buds, and when it is going to develop, it is going to develop during the 4th week. 4th week में ये tracheal bud appear होगी, which will divide into two, and you will see that how it is dividing. You समझ ले lungs की development exactly like tree की development है. Tree, दरख्त, stem होता है, ठीक है, वो जब आहिस्ता आहिस्ता ट्री ग्रो करेगा तो वो ब्रांचेस समझ लें 2 होंगी, 3 होंगी, फिर 3 ब्रांचेस से मल्टीपल होंगी, फिर मल्टीपल से मल्टीपल, मल्टीपल से मल्टीपल, राइट? इसको हम कहते हैं डाइकोटोमस डिवीजन. ठीक, सिर्फ नाम याद रख लें. आई हैव एवरीथिंग इन माय प्रेजेंटेशन व्हिच आई विल कंटिन्यू टुमारो. लेकिन अब थोड़ी सी डेवलपमेंट का कॉन्सेप्ट अपने जहन में रखिए. And what is happening? You know that how many lobes are there in the right lung? 3, right? So naturally, the right lung bud will divide into 3 and the left will divide into 2. Okay? The 2 and the 3. This is known as the tracheal bud dividing into 2 lung buds. Each lung bud will further divide into 3 on 3 primary bronchi and the secondary bronchi on the left side, and then the 2 on the left side. ठीक है, ये दो primary bronchus बन जाएंगे और ये फिर secondary bronchus बन जाएंगे. Secondary will further divide into tertiary and segmental and so on. लेकिन इनकी development किस तरह होती है, इसको हम कहते हैं dichotomous. ठीक है, dichotomous का क्या मतलब है कि one is dividing into 2, this one, okay. जब ये division हो गई, now each bronchi will divide in a dichotomous fashion. That means कि 1 will divide into 2, that 2 will divide into 4, 4 will divide into 8, 8 will divide into 16. इस तरह बढ़ता जाएगा, नंबर बढ़ता जाएगा, मल्टीप्लाई होता जाएगा with 2. ठीक है, अल्टीमेटली ये डिवीजन कंटिन्यू रहेगी until sufficient number of the bronchi they are formed. ठीक है, so this is primary bud and then secondary buds which form the 3 bronchi, and then there is formation of this. Okay, let me show you that septum. Yeah, this is the septum development. Okay, now just have a look how tracheoesophageal septum develops. Okay, this is the development of the trachea. The development of the trachea is like this. When we do this cut section, you can see this is posteriorly esophagus and this is anteriorly the trachea. Now there are 2 ridges appearing. Can you see? Someone asked me what is tracheoesophageal septum. Now this is the development of the septum. Septum क्या है? एक partition है, ठीक है? Up till this point आप देख लें ये दोनों connected हैं. It is necessary that tracheal septum must develop. जैसे ही ये tracheal septum develop होगा, complete होगा, unite करेगा, these 2 ridges are there, ठीक है? Slowly and gradually these 2 ridges will come and ultimately unite. जब ये पूरी unite कर लेंगी तो this is tracheoesophageal septum और फिर anteriorly trachea separate हो जाएगा, posteriorly esophagus separate हो जाएगी. अगर ये separation नहीं होती तो और ये communication रहती है, so what we call as the tracheoesophageal fistula. ठीक है, we'll discuss with congenital abnormalities. Till this point you see that how this tracheoesophageal septum is developing. It is developing from the closure of these. Again, there are certain factors which help in development. There's closure of this gap between the esophagus as well as the trachea. Ultimately, this connection is lost. These 2 folds will join together and this connection is lost. The trachea moves forward, okay, and is completely covered by the splanchnic mesoderm. And similarly, the esophagus is also covered by the splanchnic mesoderm. ठीक है, फिर muscles and connective tissue आ गए तो they are completely separate. What you have to tell in the development of trachea, that tracheal bud starts in 4th week from the foregut. Okay, it develops from the foregut portion. Then tracheoesophageal septum develops, which ultimately joins and separates the trachea from the esophagus. This is the simple explanation and development of the trachea. Okay, then after that, as I showed you, the lung buds, they are appearing into the growing into the splanchnic mesoderm. You can see that one part of the mesoderm is in immediate contact. Okay, it is in immediate contact, and this would form in future, number 1, the muscles and the connective tissue plus the visceral pleura. Visceral pleura उसी से बनेगा जो immediate contact में, and this visceral pleura is reflected and is in continuity with the parietal pleura. This will fuse with the body wall. Okay, this will fuse with the body wall mesoderm, and this would be known as parietal pleura, and the one which is in intimate contact will form the visceral pleura. So this is, just remember that left divides into 2 buds, the right divides into 3 buds. This is how the esophagus and the trachea are then completely separated from each other. So and where is this growth? This growth is happening in the lung cavities, right? Thoracic cavities. Now, what is thoracic cavity? The thoracic cavity is going to develop into the thoracic cavity is part of the intraembryonic coelom, okay? And intraembryonic coelom, there is within this cavity, thoracic part of the cavity, there's growth of the lung buds. You can see that how ultimately there is growth of the bronchopulmonary segments. You can see there's expansion of this cavity as well, and ultimately the lobes are formed. This is the upper lobe and this is the lower lobe, and 3 lobes are formed on the right side. Okay. So ultimately, the formation of respiratory passages will happen. And what is the timeline? Okay, please, beta, raise your hands for your attendance. Okay, now this is, you can see that how there is development of the alveoli. Okay, pehle kya hota hai? I hope you know the division. There is primary bronchus, secondary bronchus, tertiary, segmental. Ultimately, there is terminal bronchus and a respiratory bronchi. Okay, respiratory bronchioles. Now, after respiratory bronchioles, there are alveoli. You will see that how the alveoli are formed, and alveoli will keep intimate contact with the blood vessels. Okay, this is maturation of the lung. We will discuss in stages. What I want to show you is just a video that how this the respiratory, the terminal bronchioles are formed, and ultimately alveolar cells. देखिए यहाँ पे cuboidal epithelium. This epithelium will ultimately become very thin to form single layer of epithelium, that is type 1 pneumocytes or type 1 alveolar epithelium. ठीक है? So ultimately the respiratory or alveolar sac will be formed. आप देख सकते हैं ये epithelium जो है stretch हो रहा है, because it will ultimately become the single layered and very thin epithelium, right? So this was about the development, just a video. I'll just take a few more minutes to make you understand. But please keep on raising your hand. Okay. तो ये मेरी screen share हो रही?
जी मैम.
So this is how the tracheal bud has developed. This is tracheoesophageal septum. किसी ने पूछा था tracheoesophageal septum, right? This is the tracheoesophageal septum. 2 ridges, 2 grooves आते हैं, and ultimately they join, and the anteriorly trachea is separated and lungs are separated. ठीक है? So this is how the 2 structures are formed. This is the lung bud, and ultimately these are Zishan, you were asking na, these are different genes. Okay, इनके नाम भी एक sonic hedgehog है. So that's why I just concentrated on fibroblast growth factor. Zishan, I hope you are with us. The fibroblast growth factor, which will lead to क्योंकि growth of structure है, that's why I concentrated on this. While there are sonic hedgehog, NKX, and FOX, and there are many genes which are actually playing part and controlling different areas. Okay, that's why the lung bud is appearing at this area. Ultimately, we get the 2 normal structures. Okay. So the tracheoesophageal septum will develop, and it will completely separate from the the esophagus. Okay, this we have just seen. After this development, when separation has occurred, now there is division of the bronchial buds into 3 and 2 on right and left side. ठीक, उसके बाद क्या होगा? We say the next step we say is the development of bronchopulmonary segments. Bronchopulmonary segments, I told you, this is just further division of these bronchial buds. This one bronchial bud will divide into 2, those 2 will divide further into 2, those 2 will further divide into 2, and ultimately this will go on, right? So we will get lots of the terminal and the respiratory bronchioles. Okay, so this is beginning of the 4th week. Yes, why they lose cartilage is the reason is that as soon as development occurs, ठीक है, आप यूं समझ लें कि एक structure when it keeps on dividing, ठीक है, it is not getting all the structures. Why? Because of functional reason. क्योंकि it is necessary that till we reach up to the alveoli. Zishan, please understand this concept. कि alveoli are only lined by single flattened epithelium. उनका epithelium cuboidal भी नहीं हो सकता. अगर क्यूबाइडल होगा तो गैस एक्सचेंज में प्रॉब्लम होगा. इतना थिन लेयर होना चाहिए कि जो गैस है वो इजीली एक्सचेंज हो. ठीक है. सो और ऊपर क्यों है? ऊपर ये कार्टिलेज और मसल्स क्यों है? क्योंकि ऊपर वाला पार्ट कंडक्टिंग पोर्शन है, उसका काम है सिर्फ ट्रांसमिट करना गैस. ये नहीं है कि यहाँ पे अगर कार्टिलेज और मसल्स ना हो ट्रेकिया पे तो यहीं पे गैस एक्सचेंज स्टार्ट हो जाए, पूरी एयर जो है हमारे नेक में आ जाए. सो यस, एज लॉन्ग एज the terminal the alveolar sac are reached, दिस अल्टीमेटली रेस्पिरेटरी ब्रोंक्यूल्स का कार्टिलेज और मसल्स खत्म हो जाती है, क्योंकि वहां पे गैस एक्सचेंज होगी। अगर मसल्स होंगी, कार्टिलेज होगा तो गैस एक्सचेंज नहीं होगी। सो इट इज नेसेसरी दैट स्लोली एंड ग्रेजुअली द कंडक्टिंग पार्ट शुड कन्वर्ट इनटू रेस्पिरेटरी पार्ट। डू यू अंडरस्टैंड दिस पॉइंट? यस, सपोर्ट भी है प्लस ओनली द फंक्शन इज कंडक्टिंग। ठीक है, कंडक्टिंग मीन्स जो सिर्फ एक पैसेज ले, यहाँ वहां से मतलब एक्सचेंज ना हो, इट्स जस्ट conducting the air, passage to the air, support to the organ plus it is giving passage to the air till respiratory bronchiole. रेस्पिरेटरी ब्रोंक्यूल का काम है एक्सचेंज करना, और एक्सचेंज के लिए जरूरी है कि लेयर्स बहुत थिन हो, क्योंकि एक तो कैपिलरी का लेयर होगा तो दूसरा फिर अल्वेलाई का, इससे ज्यादा अगर लेयर होगा तो एक्सचेंज नहीं होगी। ठीक है, नो, how the cartilage is lost you need not to learn, but you need to learn that till what division of bronchi the cartilage is present, that's all. ठीक है, बाकी आपको ये लर्न नहीं करना कि how it is lost. ठीक है, it's just कि you need to understand. Now there are, remember that there are two phases of lung development. ठीक, अब कौन से phases हैं? एक है growth of lung buds, दूसरा है maturation of lungs. ठीक है, I'll just discuss this and stop it. ग्रोथ ऑफ लंग में क्या आ जाएगा? ग्रोथ ऑफ ब्रोंकोपल्मोनरी सेगमेंट्स। ठीक है, इसमें सिर्फ ग्रोथ हो रही है, डिवीजन हो रही है, दरख्त बन रहा है, ब्रांचेस बन रही है। ठीक है, 1 ब्रांच 2 में डिवाइड हो गई, 2 4 में 4, इस तरह ये दिस इज नोन एज ग्रोथ। अप टू 8 वीक्स ये ब्रोंकोपल्मोनरी सेगमेंट्स बन जाते हैं। अब उसके बाद पीरियड आ रहा है मैच्योरेशन ऑफ लंग्स। रिमेंबर दैट दिस इज आल्सो कॉमनली आस्क्ड, आपने ये कहना है, व्हाट क्वेश्चन विल बी आस्क्ड, व्हाट इज मैच्योरेशन ऑफ लंग्स? इट कंसिस्ट ऑफ 4 फेजेस। ठीक है, what is four phases? कहीं पे एक 5th phase भी लिखा हुआ है, which is very early embryonic phase. embryonic phase किसे कहते हैं? जब लंग बड अपीयर हो रही है 4th वीक में। ठीक है, 4th वीक में जब एंडोडर्म बन गया और लंग बड अपीयर होगी, that is embryonic phase. Otherwise the phases starts from the 5th week, that is pseudoglandular phase, then canalicular phase, secular और terminal sac phase and alveolar phase. ठीक है, थोड़ी सी पहले आप नाम याद कर लें। एम्ब्रियोनिक इज वेरी स्टार्टिंग, जब सिर्फ लंग बड अपीयर हुई, दैट इज एम्ब्रियोनिक फेज। ठीक, द मेन फेजेस ऑफ मैच्योरेशन ऑफ लंग्स स्टार्ट व्हेन देयर इज सूडोग्लैंडुलर फेज। अब इनको ये क्यों कहते हैं, आई जस्ट कम टू दैट पॉइंट। सूडोग्लैंडुलर फेज, सेकंड कैनालिक्यूलर फेज, third secular phase and 4th is alveolar phase. These phases, for example, pseudoglandular phase starts from 5th week up till 16th week. Canalicular starts from 16th up to 25th or 26th week. Secular starts from 24th up till it continues till 37 weeks, and the alveolar phase starts from the 36 or last 2 weeks before birth. ठीक है, alveolar जैसे name indicates, alveolar phase means जब alveoli बन रहे हैं। ठीक है, secular phase or terminal sac phase means when respiratory bronchioles have developed. Canalicular phase is when the terminal bronchioles have completely formed and respiratory bronchioles have started forming. Pseudoglandular phase is initial phase when the primary bronchi, the secondary bronchi, the tertiary bronchi, all these structures are formed. ठीक है, this is the phase. आपको अब क्या याद रखना है? एक तो टाइमलाइन याद रखना है, दूसरा names of these phases. ठीक है, I'll be repeating this tomorrow as well. So what is happening during pseudoglandular phase? There is during pseudoglandular there is formation of lung periphery. ठीक है, there is formation of lung bud plus there is differentiation of trachea and bronchi. This happens in the pseudoglandular phase, right? There is the formation of the bronchopulmonary segments. This is what we call as the pseudoglandular phase, which starts, अच्छा, 1 week का difference है. I mean, wherever you will see it, you will find that somewhere it is written 6 till 16, or somewhere it is written 7 till 17. So it doesn't make a big difference. कि 1 week plus minus हो कहीं पे भी. But just remember, this is the 6th till 16th week when pseudoglandular phase is there, and there is formation of the branching of the bronchial trees. ठीक है, canalicular phase में क्या हो रहा है? There is formation of the lung periphery plus there is formation of the vessels around the lungs, क्योंकि it is necessary that capillaries must develop for future exchange. ठीक, and type 1 pneumocytes are formed. There will be formation of type 2 pneumocytes as well. What is the particular time for these cells? I'll discuss further. So secular phase starts from 27 to 36 weeks. During this phase, what is happening that there's formation of secures, okay? But alveoli are still covered by the cuboidal epithelium. Gas exchange is not possible. Gas exchange to some extent will be possible. Okay, Toid, I'm just finishing. The last phase continues. Remember that the formation of alveoli starts 2 weeks before birth, continues till 10 years of life. Till 10 years, the formation of alveoli will continue. The lungs will keep on growing. Okay? The gas exchange will keep on increasing. So this is a bit tricky part which you have to memorize in terms of the development of the lungs. I'll continue and I'll start from this tomorrow, where just remember these 4 phases. We are going to discuss tomorrow what is happening during